Welcome to Game and a Half Podcast, the only podcast that covers everything in gaming. I'm Kai.
And my name is Jared.
And today we're going to be looking at r/true gaming, and your hot takes, your bold opinions, your ideas, and your thoughts.
And something else.
Something
You're still
else.
Kai. And I'm still Jared.
And I'm still Kai.
And so the first article we have is from user Swanders. And Swanders says, I think I realized a reason why telling a tightly woven narrative in games is so difficult. He says, of course, we have the basic problem of the script writers and the game designers usually being two different teams who need to exchange a lot of notes just to make something passable. But when I first tried the Sly Cooper games earlier this year, also this was posted 4 hours ago, so this isn't an old post. He decided to play the Sly Cooper games in 2019.
You know what sounds fun? Sly Cooper.
I realized there's an additional hurdle. It was in Sly 3 when I had a mission to plant fake evidence that some competing teams were trying to sabotage each other. One had us sneaking through their hotel room while trying to avoid laser detection while they were all sleeping. Given my experience with movies, I kept expecting something to go wrong to add tension, like a plate falls off a table or an alarm clock goes off. Not necessarily something that would ruin the mission, but something that would add a little twist to the progression. Something where Sly might need to rush a little bit more to get the job done and barely escape. But that didn't happen.
Well. First of all, you want games to have really bad movie cliches in them? I want to be going through wires, then a plate falls.
I mean, if anything,
I would be
these old 90s or the early 2000s games would have had those cliches.
You're right. They would have been like, what can we add here? I would be pissed if I was playing a game and I was progressing through it, and then all of a sudden
a plate falls and you like failed the mission or something.
It just like ruins your ability to do anything.
No, but he said, oh, I don't want it to affect the game. I just wanted to add some tension to the experience. It's not going to affect your progression at all.
That's just a timer. That's how you do that in games.
Yeah.
If you want to add tension, add a timer.
Yeah. Swanders, I don't think that Sly Cooper is the best example of a narrative. See, I thought this post was old when I first looked at it. I was like, okay, maybe he doesn't have a lot of things to pick
Maybe
from.
2008, you know.
But there's so many games that have amazing narrative. Last of Us.
Yeah.
Have you played Last of Us? Did you look at Last of Us and Sly Cooper and be like, you know what?
Sly Cooper.
The sentient raccoon.
Well, also, the example of like the game developers not talking to the screen like the script writers is like, that's like saying animation is never gonna be like a functioning way of making a story because the animators don't talk to the screenwriters.
He says they exchange way too much notes and it gets confusing.
Oh, does it? They get confused. Yeah. What do you mean a plate has to fall?
I don't know what that means.
I mean, I think it is harder to instill narrative into games because games are so much longer than films.
Yeah. I don't think this is a good example of that.
No.
I do think making a narrative that holds the player, because a lot of people, the difference with film and games is people want to experience these stories. They want to play. They don't want to sit back and watch. That's why a lot of people skip the cutscenes.
I don't know who would ever do that.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so that I get in that way how, yes, it's difficult to create a riveting narrative.
Well, not only that, but like cutscenes are hard because you're playing a game and you're immersed in it, and then to get a cutscene, you have to be there's usually a graphical change, so then gameplay changes, and you're taken out of it, and you're like, I just want to play. Like, I don't want to watch these people. I don't want to watch the character that I'm controlling and not have any control anymore. That's not fun.
Right.
Which is why I can handle when there's like, they're not cutscenes, but when NPCs talk to you and give you pertinent game information.
Right, stuff that's going to be important to some of your progression or something that you need to know to find a certain thing or something along those lines.
Yeah, but a full cutscene just like pulls you out of it, so.
I think it depends. I think with graphics and facial rendering getting closer and closer to reality, people are interested more when it looks more cinematic, when it looks more like life. People are more interested in paying attention. That doesn't mean that the story can not be interesting just because your characters look appealing. You still have to have an interesting story to tell. But when the characters and the voice actors seem like real people that you can connect with, it's a little easier to pay attention to that narrative.
What's that game? The Rain one.
Heavy Rain.
Heavy Rain.
And see, like,
That's a great story.
Yeah, the story was great. It's PS3, so the graphics weren't incredible.
No,
but I mean, it was situations that you can connect with. It was you played the husband and his family, and then his son goes missing, and it's you're trying to find your son, and a lot of people can relate to that stressful experience of losing a child in a crowded mall or whatever.
And unlike Sly Cooper, there's actually things in that game that like feed into the suspense, because obviously it's a suspense thriller,
right? Which
Sly Cooper is not. Sly
Cooper's just way more comedic and
it's also
self-aware than anything else.
It's younger too, so it's like you're gonna have like, you can't have too complicated of a narrative. You wouldn't have a Heavy Rain narrative in a Sly Cooper game.
I kind of want that. Now it's just an animated Sly Cooper. And
Sly's son gets kidnapped.
And then murdered.
He's just running through the world, just shanking and shivving people left and right, trying to get information.
That damn raccoon, you can't trust him.
So I think the problem here is that you're playing the wrong games for narrative, man.
Yeah, if you're looking for narrative, this... I'm curious of what, if you were thinking about this, what drew you to Sly Cooper and why you were playing them. I mean, they're great games. Like, the Sly Cooper games are fun, but they don't have a riveting narrative. I can't tell you what... I mean, the Sly Cooper is about Sly and his team going on heists and stealing things, and that's essentially what Sly Cooper is about.
Sly Cooper is just Ocean's films.
Yeah. There you go. It's just with animals.
Ocean's films
with talking
with animals.
Yeah, I think you're playing the wrong game if you're trying to find something that's going to pull you in on a narrative level. I don't think that Sly Cooper is the best example of that.
But it's also not the best example of a game that's not narrative. So like, it's just an okay game.
It is just an okay
Sly
game.
Cooper is a very narrative-driven game in the fact that like,
it's very linear.
Yeah, you're not. The story's going to be easy to grasp.
Right.
But I don't think Sly Cooper. The problem is that I'm assuming you're an adult, because you clearly know the word narrative.
Right.
So, like,
story time.
There are definitely games that are created for a broad category of people, and especially because of when Sly Cooper was made. That was definitely the generation where gaming was not considered a multi-generational thing. It was this is it's a toy. They marketed it and sold it as a toy. It was like for children.
Right.
And then they realized that adults were playing video games, and they were like, oh, a whole other market segment that we can, get to.
Yeah, and Sly Cooper was also a generation of gameplay mechanics and styles that we just don't see anymore, like that 3D platformer kind of experience that was really like, I would say it was popular. Kind of, well, yeah, it was super popular, especially like early 2000s with like the Nintendo 64 and then into like the GameCube and the PS2. There was so many of them. I mean, Jak and Daxter, we had Ratchet and Clank. That's all. That's the only.
No, there's literally hundreds
thousands. Ninja.
Of them.
We were just talking about that the other day. Yeah, but that genre of games is coming back a little bit. You have things like Yooka-Laylee and you have things like A Hat in Time that are coming back, but they just don't hook people as much as, I mean, the shooters and Fortnite and Apex, and those things are just more prominent.
It's what's in vogue right now. People want that killy bang bang game.
Or if they're wanting a narrative, they want a deep experience that they can relate to, like with The Last of Us, or with games that really can help people relate to.
And we've gotten so good graphically that usually heavily narrative games are cartoonish.
Right.
I can't think of a game with like a huge narrative that is like cartoonish like Sly Cooper from this generation.
When you say huge narrative, do you mean like cinematically, like close to film?
I just mean like...
Well, because I'm trying to think of big, beautiful... I thought of like Breath of the Wild. I guess that's not like a big narrative. It's like...
I think it's a narrative that plays well to the people who are going to be playing it, which are people who like Zelda, because it plays off of all the other like lore, but like it's not a necessarily exciting story.
No. If you didn't know anything about Zelda going in, you probably wouldn't be into... The world is more intriguing than the story that's happening itself.
Well, and that's the problem with lots of games, is it's like... If your world isn't serving your story, if it's just alongside the story, and the world is more interesting, like Witcher is a perfect example.
Right.
Like Witcher the game is incredible and it's really fun to play and everything is very beautiful, but the story is just like tedious and I played a lot of that
you play hide and seek with kids at one point.
Right.
I remember that part. Yeah, I'm trying to think. And there's been like small indie games, like we were just kind of talking about Celeste earlier, but Celeste is one where that is a more cartoony game. I mean, you're not looking at it in the environment or the world, but it talks about anxiety and dealing with anxiety and not running away from your problems and facing them going forward. And I mean, that I think is
the exact reason people play video games, to run from their problems and not deal with them.
No, not at all. No, I was just trying to think of games that had a interesting story that weren't
graphically trying to represent reality.
Right. So Celeste was one of those games that came to mind. I was like, okay.
You know what does one really well?
What?
Sly Cooper.
Oh, yeah. I remember Sly Cooper. That was the
known
best narrative.
As a narrative.
I never related to a raccoon more than playing Sly Cooper.
Sly Cooper. Yeah. I mean, you are half black and half white, so...
Oh my god, you're right.
Oh my god, you're right.
Maybe I did relate to Sly Cooper.
Dad?
Dad? I feel like that, not relating to reality or being graphically appealing, but just like made you think more, like The Outer Wilds. Like that game... Or not...
That game had no narrative, though.
No...
It was very meta and it was beautifully done.
I was just thinking of stuff that invoked feelings in me.
Yeah.
And that game was definitely one of them. It had narrative without having a narrative.
And that's interesting because Annapurna, the people who helped develop that game, is a production company.
Right. Really?
They're a film production company. They make they made films like Booksmart, Vice. They just won an award at Toronto for some film that they just made. So Annapurna obviously has a strong grasp on storytelling.
Right.
So I think that you're going to see that a lot more as these production companies who are struggling to make as much money in these, in the film world because of how film is changing with online streaming services and stuff like that. They're going to start moving to other forms of telling story, and video games is a great platform to do that. And with a game like Outer Wilds, which is such an interesting idea,
right?
Even though it's not really narratively focused, it has a strong. You create the narrative,
right.
Which is that's the whole balance between the environment and the story. When those two things are so intertwined, like in Outer Wilds, it's like I'm creating the story. I'm creating my own journey. I have all the choices, and in a real sense, that's a true open world game. Yeah. Like that's the problem I find with some open world games. Like even with Red Dead, like it's open world, but like it's really not. Like
well, we were just talking about that earlier, like the idea of choice in games, and like you have these open world games and they convey this sense of being able to choose wherever you can go and choose what to do, but it's like, do you really have a choice? Are your choices really changing how the game is being played? Which in Outer Wilds it really is. Like your choices affect when your world is in a 20-minute time loop, your choices affect how the game is going to be played out.
Right. And in Red Dead, you have to do certain things to progress.
Right.
And it's like that's
like the first 2 hours of the game is like getting through that story before you can
not only that, but just like you can sit and play Red Dead Redemption 2 or the first one for hours and never do the story.
Yeah.
And like there won't be a story. And you can play an hour of Outer Wilds, which is like no story, and you create your own story within a 20-minute loop.
Right.
3 times. So it's like,
if you haven't played Outer Wilds, go play it.
Go play it.
It's on Game Pass. I think it's like $20 to $15 or something like that. It's so fun. It was an interesting concept, and we couldn't help to just be like, let's check this out.
Yeah.
And then after playing through it, at the end of it, or the end in my air quotes, because there's so many different endings that you can experience.
Bunch of options.
It definitely had it invoked an emotion in me that I hadn't had in other.
Yeah, I would say another game that you haven't played, but that is very that you haven't played.
Oh.
That is very simplistic in its design and aesthetic, but very heavy in its story, is Kentucky Route Zero.
Oh yeah, I remember we were looking at that. That's like right up your alley.
Yeah,
that's a Kai game right there.
It's a Kai game. Yeah, it's very, very simple, like point and click movement kind of style, but it's very well told in its narrative, and I think that's, you know, another game that comes to mind is like Gone Home.
Oh yeah, Gone Home was really, and we beat that like less than an hour. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like the story that it keeps enticing you to explore more of this world. I mean, for me, it was exciting and equal parts disappointing, because I was expecting some big thing to happen, and when we got to the end, that never did. But I always wanted to know more about that world and more about that experience. And there's a way you can beat the game in like 5 minutes, which is super cool.
And I think that's one of the things about games like that, especially horror games, have this beautiful cop out of like. Because, like, when you're in an open world game and you can't go into a building, you're like, well, this is upsetting. Like, you walk up to a building, but when you're in a horror game and you're locked in a house and you can't get out, it's like, oh, I can't get out because the spirit's keeping me here. Like, there's no it's so consistent with the world that it doesn't have to be open world. Like, it's so path-based, but it doesn't feel as path-based.
Right.
And, like...
It can be linear without feeling like a linear experience.
Yeah, and I think there's such an emphasis on building these open world games where... I don't think it's necessary. Like, well,
the big thing like nowadays is like people say like you build a big open world, but there's nothing in it.
Yeah,
like it's impressive that you have this game that takes hours to traverse if you were walking through it, but there's nothing really there's no meat in this big open world. It's just open. Yeah. There's nothing in it. There's no content.
Right. It's various levels with periods of walking simulation, which is what Red Dead Redemption 2 felt like. Play through the beginning of Red Dead 2. The story is not compelling enough to carry you through the insane walking sim.
And that's unfortunate. And I think, I mean, maybe people really did enjoy Red Dead for the story, but the whole time playing through the first like hour and a half, that's just this forced narrative. That's what it feels like. It's like I want to explore there's situations in that game that felt more linear than other games that weren't actually linear.
Because you're like, oh my god, look at this beautiful world, and you're like, no,
right?
You have to walk in the snow for an hour.
The narrative pulls you back, and it's like you have to walk next to this guy and listen to him talk in the snow. You can't explore that thing you want to go see.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean. Saunders, there you go. Saunders, I would just recommend if you are looking...
Stop playing Sly Cooper.
Stop playing Sly Cooper, or finish Sly Cooper, since you're on the third one. You might as well just finish the series at this point. But if you're looking for a narrative experience, there's lots. Annapurna is actually coming out with another game. I don't remember the title, but it's like this top-down game, and it's about a man and his wife, and this man is just reliving... this again, another time loop experience, kind of like the Outer Wilds.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And it's like he has to. He's like solving his wife's murder. Or there's so many different narratives that can play.
Resetting,
yeah. But they did a really cool thing, and it worked with Outer Wilds and time. So they're implementing that similar time mechanic to this other game. I really wish I remembered the name of it. But yeah, that looks like it's going to be a really cool game too.
Yeah. Alrighty.
So yeah, on to the next one.
It's
Stories.
Epic.
Oh, did you say epic?
I did say epic.
How epic do you think it's going to be? I don't know what I was going to say there. I was going to say, hot take coming in. So this next article...
And by hot take, literally the entire gaming industry up in arms about...
Oh, I thought you were going to... Literal, and the area we're in is quite warm.
Oh, it is. It's quite hot in the studio today.
And I decided to wear sleeves. Okay, so this next article, it comes from user potato_on_fire 87, and he says... What made people so angry about Epic exclusivity when everyone is okay with console exclusivity? Oh, damn!
Oh,
hot
wow.
potato on fire. People are really, like, hostilely angry at the fact that Epic Store is having exclusive games. So if you don't know, Epic Store is similar. Well, Epic makes games as well, but they have a store where you can also purchase games. And games that have come out recently have had either full exclusivity on Epic Store or a timed exclusivity. Like I think Borderlands 3 is timed exclusive for a year on Epic Store. So you can only get it for the first year on Epic Store, and after that you'll be able to get it on Steam or where the hell you want to get it. But Steam has been around forever, and people have a really deep integrated connection with Steam. So and Steam's really been the only place where you can buy games. I mean, you can buy physical copies of PC games, and you can buy games on like Amazon. You can get digital codes, but for the most part, people go to Steam to buy games.
Yeah.
That's where you have your library of games. That's where all your games are stored at. Steam is usually the place to go. So when something else comes out and it's like, hey, you can buy games over here. Also, you can't buy your game that you want to buy on your usual platform. You have to buy it here now. I guess I can see why people would be upset. Anyways, I want to read what Potato on Fire has to say. So he says, actually, they were not just okay with console exclusivity, they would actually hammer down anyone saying that it's bad. I understand there are reasons for our console exclusivity, by the way. Both sides are almost the same thing, and I would actually argue that Epic exclusivity is better. Here's why. Number one, all Epic exclusives are timed. Okay, so they're all timed. I didn't know that if there was one that was fully Epic or not. While the majority of console exclusives don't come anywhere else. Two, Epic is on the same platform as other choices, PC, while consoles need to buy a separate system to play those games, not just download a launcher and sign in. There are some minor bads on both sides that I won't mention, but most of the people argue that, one, they want choice on the platform they buy their games on. Well, it's the same for me and the others that want to choose to play games on consoles that we don't have, that we can't, or a choice to play a console we don't have. Epic Store is not complete and misses a lot of features like user reviews, while it's the same thing with console stores lacking useful features, but no one cares? ?
No one cares?
And fully knowing Reddit, this post might be hell, but maybe I'll find a few people with good points and opinions.
Don't fear!
Don't fear, Potato on Fire, because I agree with you. I don't think Epic exclusivity is bad. I think Steam having good competition is a good thing. I love that you connected that with console exclusivity, because so many people will stand behind their Xbox or their Sony and
or their PC
and be like, yes, these games need to be exclusive on this system, and I'll stand behind it. Here's my console or my game player of choice, and here's all these exclusive games that you can only get on this system.
Yeah.
And no one had a problem with that. No one was, and so when Epic came out and it was like, not even exclusive games, timed exclusives, being like, you have to wait a year if you want to buy this on Steam.
Also, it's free software.
You just had to download it. You don't even have to buy another console or anything like that.
I would understand if like Epic Games was only
charging people or something.
Or it was only for Mac.
Oh, yeah.
It was for one or God forbid, Linux. Like, you had to run Linux.
That would be interesting.
That I would be like, all right, that's kind of messed up.
Right.
But it takes 10 seconds.
You can download Epic Store launcher on any
And the crazy
system.
thing, there's a lot of people mad about this.
There's a lot of people mad about
They're
this.
like, how dare you? It would be like, there was a time when Netflix was the only streaming service.
Right.
And then all of a sudden Hulu comes out, and then the entire world of television watchers was like, what the fuck
what are you doing?
Why can't I watch freaking Modern Family on Netflix? Why do you exist, Hulu?
Right. And Hulu does have exclusives. Amazon has exclusives. They have exclusive shows that are just for their platform, and those are selling points for people to buy or go on these different platforms.
Right.
And for Epic, again, they're not even fully exclusive. They're timed exclusives. Yeah. You just gotta wait. You gotta be patient.
Or download Epic.
Right.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, I was talking to another friend the other day about this because
other friends.
Yeah, you're right. I only have Kai. He's my only friend, and he's stabbing himself with a thumbtack, pulling the skin off of his foot. It's kind of disturbing, but I'm gonna move past it.
Wow.
And he's very much a PC gamer. I'm pretty sure that he only
his friend, not me.
No, yeah, Kyle's not a PC gamer. But I asked his opinion on the Epic exclusivity because Borderlands 3 just came out, and Borderlands 3 is, and if you're playing, or if you just have a PC, if you want to play Borderlands 3, you have to get it on Epic because that's the only way you can get Borderlands 3 if you're playing on PC. And he said that he really thinks that Epic exclusivity is a good idea. He thinks that having Steam as having some competition for Steam is going to be a good thing overall, and I completely agree with that. Yeah, there's so many people. So many people.
Well, not only that, it's going to keep Steam in check. Steam has, if you have no competition, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
So competition of being like, oh, we need to be more we need to work on our platform and make sure that we can compete in this market, that's going to be a great thing. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong with a challenger. I obviously understand people have, preferences. And I think I think we're seeing the same thing that's evoked when people are like, this game's going to be exclusive on PS4 and they're an Xbox gamer, which is like,
right.
They're like, well, it's not going to be good anyway.
Or games that like remasters of games that were traditionally exclusive, like any of the Spyro titles, or like Crash Bandicoot. Those were Sony characters and frontrunners for Sony in general for a long time. Like Crash Bandicoot was a representation of Sony. There was so many like commercials of Crash and Mario battling it out. And the remasters of those games were on all platforms. They were on PC, they were on Xbox. And a lot of people were upset about that because they were saying that, hey, these are my Sony exclusive games. This is what I grew up with. And now it's on an Xbox? Ugh, how dare you?
How dare you break those unspoken barriers?
Do you think that we'll ever see like a Halo game on PS4?
100%.
Really?
Microsoft is just taking hits from a bong recently and is like, games for everyone, man.
Right. Well, I think they realize that because for one, I mean, this is another topic, but Xbox doesn't have, I would say, the great exclusives. That's where I'm the topic of exclusives. The time being. So they're trying to just dip their toe in all of the waters they can because they're like, here, Nintendo, you can have some of our exclusives.
If you want a really hot take, I don't think Xbox is going to make it much longer.
You don't think so?
No. I think Microsoft is focusing.
I will disagree because I think that Xbox like as a console, like a video game. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I think that like with stuff like they have something called xCloud, and it's where you can play your Xbox games on every system or any device.
Yeah.
You won't necessarily have to have. Eventually, you won't have to have this Xbox. You can play things on. I mean, they already have Game Pass on PC.
Yeah.
So it's like those games that were traditionally on Xbox, you can just play on your computer. You don't even have to have an Xbox.
Right.
So yeah, no, I'll agree to that.
That's the logic system is based on what I've seen from them for the last 4 years.
They focus more
4
on.
years.
Well, I don't know. They've focused more traditionally on hardware than games. I feel like the last couple of years, or just again buying small developers and bringing up their catalog of developers that they have.
Right, but their catalog of developers isn't producing anything.
They came out. They had Cuphead. And
don't get me started on Cuphead.
Ori and the Blind Forest.
Yeah, and Cuphead's not even exclusive anymore.
2 games that are now available on Nintendo Switch. So you can play it mobilely now, and it's not like those games need to look good either. They're cartoons.
Like that it's just from what I see them investing in, I can't imagine they're gonna like. It just seems that everything is pointing to a world where A, everything can be played on your Microsoft computer, and B, everything is available for everyone else.
Right. I think that's what they're going to lean towards. They're going to be like, we're not going to be necessarily a console competitor for Nintendo or Sony, but you're going to be able to play our games anywhere.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to play our games on Nintendo Switch, on PlayStation, on
Which is an
Mac.
interesting choice for them because I mean, they were the last to the console battle.
Right.
And they seemed to be the first out of it. So
Right. Yeah, that is an interesting point. I didn't think about that.
By the way, fun fact that neither of us realized, so, I mean, incredible, the PS1 came out 2 years before the Nintendo 64.
Yeah, it came out in 1994.
That's
which just shows
crazy to think about.
Because the PS1 had pretty good like rendered cutscenes. Like Final Fantasy VII was on the PlayStation 1, and you compare that to like. Well, I mean, like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time were good games, but I feel like the PS1 was just incredible at the amount of power.
Way ahead of its time.
I mean, discs. I mean, the PS1 had discs.
Discs, yeah.
Where, I mean, Nintendo tried... There was planned to be a disc reader for the Nintendo 64, and it never ended up coming into fruition, and that's what kind of led... GameCube. I'm curious of why they went with like the little UMDs instead of. People thought that was going to be the future, like PSP and GameCube with the little tiny UMD.
Well, it's
discs.
crazy. Honestly, discs were kind of a mistake.
Right.
Nintendo had it right all along. You should be storing games on flash memory. That's like you can. It has way quicker access speed. It has way quicker read and write speed. So like, and it has unlimited options for storage. Obviously, at the time they couldn't get huge storage because it was prohibitively expensive. But like the games weren't big. But now it would be so much easier to keep hard discs, like not hard discs, but like hard, flash copies of games on
a card or something
on a card than it would be to keep it on discs. Because discs are so limited.
And the problem with that now is we're slowly drifting into this fully digital world, which that's another thing that people are upset and scared about. But I mean,
which also will render a console pointless.
Yeah,
as we see, Apple Arcade and Google Stadia and
Game Pass
and moving all this. It's like, why do I need this console to put discs in?
Right. I mean, I remember when Game Pass first came out, I was really skeptical about it because, I mean, when anything goes from having a physical copy to digital, I feel like the community is going to be a little iffy about it. They're like, do I really own any of these things? Am I actually an owner of this? You're going to take it away and I'm going to lose all this digital content? But like we've talked about before, that happened with music.
I also think that's like our generation thing.
Really?
Like, yeah, I can't see my generation, Gen Z, being like
upset about physical copies of things.
There's a generation of people now who's never had a physical copy.
They grew up with things being digital.
They're like, why am I worried that it's going to get taken away? All my favorite shows on Netflix got taken away, and I lived through that. So it's like, I just think they have a different outlook. We came from a generation where everything was physical to everything all of a sudden being digital and it's like...
It happened really quickly,
what happens if I want to watch my VHS copy of Aladdin?
I was thinking to say Pokemon the first movie, because I do have a VHS copy of Pokemon the first movie, and no way to play it.
What if they re-edit it and it's never the same?
Actually, I bought the Blu-ray version, so I'm fine.
But I mean, still, and I just don't think that's in the the thought and the thinking of the next generation. Is like, I
agree.
What were we talking about?
Console exclusivity and Epic Store. Do you think we'll get to? Well, I mean, and like we were talking about, Microsoft might be the front runner of this, of just exclusivity not being a thing, not being in it. Like, if everything's on every console, like, we get to a point where we don't have to worry about exclusivity.
No. And
exclusivity also drives sales and drives
and the
marketing.
reason is because of where games are going. I don't see that ending, because what we see things like Google Stadia and Apple Arcade and Game Pass becoming more and more, look at what's happening in the streaming wars in like television and film right now. You have Netflix competing with Amazon, competing in all these exclusives.
Right.
The whole point, the whole way that we drive subscription-based services is by users. Right. So you have to have exclusive content to get users over.
Give them a reason to go on your platform over someone else's platform.
Right. And but that being said, in film and television, there's distribution, which there's no system right now of distribution as far as like the reason Apex works on all systems except for Switch because it can't run it is because the company that makes Apex doesn't owe anything to the game. It's a free game. They just put it on the platform. They have to pay a flat fee that everyone else pays.
Correct.
But once it's on there, anyone else can pay it. From a distribution standpoint of film and television, it's like you have to be paid by Netflix or Amazon to put your content on there.
That's true.
Whereas the developer is paying to put it on the stores, and then it gains traction that way.
That's true.
Which is it's an interesting, I don't know, it's an interesting shift that's going to happen in the next 5 years of how games are distributed to people.
Well, I mean, we already have things like the physical stores that we go to, like GameStop, losing revenue and going bankrupt and then coming out of bankruptcy and slowly getting pushed to the back burner because people are buying things digital and no one's going to these stores. And them as a company have to change the way they're looking at gaming. They're looking at having more of a lounge and more of a area where gamers can come together and talk. Because for a while, I mean, when I was going to GameStop, that's what it was. I mean, you would go to GameStop and that would be a way for you to talk to someone else who's also just as much into this community as you were. And I think that's the direction that they're heading.
And this speaks to a broader cultural thing, especially coming from America. Obviously, other countries don't have this problem, but because we're smoking a flash drive, I think he's old and he thinks it's a jewel. I'm not sure. Speaking of other countries where this isn't as prolific a problem, but we were from the 1950s, huge box stores blew up and exploded.
Right.
And people thought they would be around forever, and we're watching now the very slow death because of the internet of all these huge stores, and we have all this real estate.
Rest in peace, Blockbuster.
Rest in peace, Blockbuster,
there's
Circuit City, hundreds of retail giants that are starting to
Kmart.
die. And not Kmart's still around. Don't scare people. That's in some towns. That's the only store that exists. But Amazon, and the internet is just destroying these businesses, and it's we're gonna have all this real estate, all this retail specific real estate that is going to have to be filled somehow. And I think
They're just gonna be like
I think GameStop saw the writing on the wall and really just put their best foot forward, which is the community aspect of gaming.
Yeah.
If you can get gamers to come out and get together, that's A, great for gaming, and B, great for GameStop because it's somewhere to meet.
Right.
And it's the reason that a lot of comic book stores have survived. Because
it's a way for people to
because they're a community.
Right.
Like, you go into a comic book store, there are people playing, like, trading card games.
Right.
And there's a whole culture that exists within the store. Yeah. And it's not that, like, it's a great business model. It's that it has a community that keeps it alive.
And that's what keeps it around, yeah.
Right. And I think that if GameStop can really... I mean, obviously, it's not going to be able to sustain as many stores as it has now. Because
it's going to shut down a lot of stores.
It's they're not
going to make as much money, but they'll be around still.
But they're still going to be a part of culture, and they're still going to have a company legacy, which I think is incredibly important within gaming. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see the changes that will come.
Exclusivity.
Sorry, we got a little off topic.
Don't be mad at Epic exclusivity. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Fight me outside.
It's a great.
How about that?
It's just about the changing landscape, and people are always going to be mad about that. So
now, for a really hot take, in my opinion. So if you don't know, if you're one of those people that don't listen to our podcast, I know there's not that many, but if you don't know,
if you listen past the first 3 minutes, which is exceedingly rare,
then you would know that I love Nintendo. I suckle the teat and I do it willfully and proudly. And I love Pokemon. I've been playing Pokemon since Red and Blue first came out, and I've played every Pokemon since then. I've watched the anime. I've watched the movies. I had sex with Pikachu once. I've been all over.
Consensual.
Yeah, he agreed. So this comes from user Adam__. And he says, Game Freak has forgotten what makes Pokemon fun. That hurts me a little bit because I think Pokemon is fun. But I will read. I really like his argument of why he thinks Pokemon isn't fun. There's things that I agree with and there's things that I don't agree with, but I'll read at least a portion of this because it's a little lengthy, but here we go. So he says, in a recent interview with Game Informer, composer, I'm going to fuck up all these names, Junichi Masuda, and the director of Pokemon Sun and Moon, Shigeru Mori, were asked if Pokemon will take any inspiration from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and offer players an open-world, freeform experience. The two actually sort of laughed at this question and stated that Pokemon series is more geared towards a storytelling experience rather than the game's focus on an open-world exploration and discovery. This made me kind of mad. As a longtime fan of the series, the idea of the creators of the series can't see that the value in an open world Pokemon experience is incredibly frustrating. It makes it even worse that they think that the Pokemon games are fundamentally some sort of rich storytelling experience. When I look back on the history of the series, it makes me think that Game Freak has forgotten the core elements that Pokemon holds, and that keeps players coming back time and time again. So what makes Pokemon fun? So he says, is it the story? He says, doubtful. Even though the latest entries in the series, Sun and Moon, had more character-driven narrative than past games, it's hardly the reason people play Pokemon. It's important to remember that in Red and Blue, the first games... Sorry, the page is just reloaded and I don't have the story anymore. The Red and Blue had no story. You were just you had your rival and you were fighting an evil corporation, which was Team Rocket. And Gold and Silver picked up that story a tad, but Ruby and Sapphire were the ones that began tasking players with saving the world from some kind of high concept anomaly. But at its core, Pokemon wasn't founded on its storytelling prowess. So is it the gameplay? Closer, but probably not. The series has yet to overhaul its turn-based combat, which is starting to show its age. Pokemon battles are still as tedious as ever, where the player hits a single button and is rewarded with a 3 to 5 second attack animation that they've seen 100 times before. Although it's undoubtedly a series staple and can definitely have its fun moments, Pokemon Go has made it clear that it's the concept of Pokemon that gets people excited, not necessarily the turn-based combat that the series is known for. That is what the core ingredient that makes Pokemon... so what is the core ingredient that makes Pokemon fun? So I'll just say it because I can't think of a clever segue. It's the world of Pokemon itself. It's the joy of exploring a whole world of monsters and capturing some of your own. It's traveling a region from coast to coast in hopes of becoming the best in the land. It's going to dark caves and abandoned buildings and dark forests to discover legends that you can have for yourself. That's what gets fans excited when they hear a new game is coming out. The chance to explore a new world filled with new monsters. There's more here, but I'm tired of reading, so I'll give my opinions. Adam __, I think your argument was very well laid out, and you have a lot of good points in here, but I hate you! I love Pokemon! Just kidding.
Wow.
No, I actually will agree with a lot of his points. I still enjoy the experiences that I've had with all of the Pokemon games, but I agree that I don't really go into a Pokemon game for the story itself. And we were just talking about narrative in games. Some of the stories I've thought were good, and some of the stories have tried to dabble in the lore of Pokemon, like X and Y, which I really enjoy. That makes them a little more entertaining when they go into what these games are about and how they're... It's more of a collected world than just individual experiences. So I enjoy that. But the story definitely gets put on the back burner. As for the turn-based combat, I mean, it has. Nowadays, we see less games that aside from just like JRPGs, less games that have this turn-based mechanic. There's ways to get through that. I mean, you have... not get through the turn-based mechanics, but have them be a little more bearable. Like, you can turn off animations, you can do text speed, you can speed up the process. But we were playing through... it was when Pokemon Let's Go was coming out. They took out the whole battling with wild Pokemon. Like, instead of doing that, they combined the Pokemon Go mechanic where you just threw Pokeballs at a shrinking and increasing size circle. And I thought when that first came out that was going to destroy the Pokemon experience, because that's what Pokemon was. You battle Pokemon and you capture them.
You use 700 Super Repel, still run into Pokemon. It's about how terrible the experience is.
But going in and realizing that, and not battling Pokemon, made me actually really enjoy the experience. Just being able to, like you said, like run through... Oh, the other thing was Pokemon were in the overworld, so you can just avoid Pokemon that you didn't want to run into.
Which is sort of realistic.
Right. And a couple of like RPGs have touched on that with, you can change the percentage or the rarity of running into a Pokemon or a creature in general. So being able to, so I will agree that the turn-based combat has aged. I still enjoyed the experience, and I enjoyed Sun and Moon a lot. Now going to what he deems as the reason that people go to Pokemon, which is just exploring the world. That I really enjoy. I mean, going to the very beginning in Red and Blue and going all the way up to Sun and Moon, and we have Sword and Shield coming out in like a month or two. The world is really what is enticing about these games. These environments of islands and mountain ranges and fields, and then all the creatures that you can run into throughout there, I think really is the most enticing experience, because then you have all of these creatures. Every generation they add 100 or so, and you get to decide which ones you deem worthy or interesting enough to be on your team, and then you can establish a connection with these things that you have caught and that have stayed with you through your experience in the game. But Kai, I'm interested to hear your perspective on this, because we both obviously grew up playing Pokemon together, but I have suckled the teat way more than you have. So I'm interested to see how...
I've tasted the titty juice.
Yeah, you've dabbled in the titty juice. But I'm interested to hear your perspective on Mr. _'s
I think he has
debate.
a point, but he's missing... I think he's onto something here, but he's missing a key part of it, which is what we were talking about before, which is the experience of having a world and a story so connected that it doesn't feel like there's a story being shoved down your throat, which is the problem with Pokemon games, because the world...
they shove it. They shove it real hard.
The world is so interesting, and you're like, wow, this is incredible. I just want to I don't know how many Pokemon games I've played where the whole point of the Pokemon game is like, go to the gyms,
Beat the Elite Four.
But there's a whole story going on that you just are like, mashing through
Text.
just to you're just like, I don't care about this stupid villain that's gonna take over the world. Like, we know it's not gonna work. Like, because every Pokemon game has been identical story. I think it's hilarious that the creators of Pokemon think like they have some narrative gold, because they've literally done the same thing from day one, even to the newest, in the series. Like, it's not interesting storytelling. What it is an interesting world, and if you can figure out how to take that world and make people be able to form their own stories in it without it feeling like it's being rammed down their throat.
Right.
Like, I would be interested to play a Pokemon game without the story aspect. I think it would be just as fun. I don't think I would miss any of it.
And I think that, I mean, when it comes to the early games where we were limited mechanically, games now that have vast open worlds like Breath of the Wild or like The Witcher, I think just the idea of having, I mean, one, just the fixed camera really limits your ability to feel like you're exploring a world, not just walking down a series of long rectangles to go to your next square and your next long rectangle.
Making classic Pokemon three-dimensional does not make it open world.
Right, and Sword and Shield is dabbling a little bit into this. In this game, they have thing called the wild area. In this area, you have a free camera, so you can run around, you can look around, and we haven't seen much besides just these big open plains that, for the most part, feel a little empty, aside from the creatures that you can still see walking around. So I'm really glad they took that from Let's Go, one of the features that people really enjoyed, and implemented that into this game. But I'm really interested to see of what else you can find in these areas. Like, is there going to be buildings you can explore? Is there going to be treasures you can find? Is there going to be more to do than just walking around, or just a big open area you're using to get from one section of the map to the other section? They just
copy and pasted the code from Pokemon Go into like a section of the game.
Yeah.
And they were like, enjoy it. We're not going to give it. Well, that's a crazy thing. They have the ability to do non-fixed camera the entire game.
Right. I'm interested. I mean, we also have to remember, like, a lot of people think Nintendo makes Pokemon games.
No, it's not.
Nintendo doesn't make Pokemon games.
Game Freak and the Pokemon Company
make Pokemon games. It's different than with Mario and Zelda, just because Pokemon is also up there with one of Nintendo's flagship titles. But Mario and Zelda were made by Nintendo.
Yeah.
So I think they, throughout the life of those two games, took risks, and those risks have played out because people enjoy the worlds that those games have created, which I think the Pokemon Company is a little more skeptical with taking that big of a leap.
Though I will say,
afraid of
Nintendo could 100% strong arm Game Freak and the Pokemon Company.
Oh no, you make an open world Pokemon right now.
Right, because they've only ever released Pokemon games on Nintendo's platforms.
Yeah.
And not only that, they've only ever released Pokemon games on Nintendo's portable platforms for the most part.
For the most part. There's been a couple console ones here and there, but for the most part, they were a handheld game.
Specifically, the canon games.
The core series,
the core series of Pokemon has always been a handheld game.
Correct.
Which I never understood.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it doesn't enhance it at all to be able to other than being able to take it places. Like,
they didn't want to change the sauce, man. They had a secret sauce, and they dabbled, and I think for them, those games they dabbled with weren't as successful as their handheld ones. Like, they did Pokemon Coliseum, and they did Pokemon Gale of Darkness, and they did Battle Revolution, and those games they decided to go a little more open world with it, and they didn't fare as well as the handheld game. So they're a little more.
Because they missed the one part of the handheld game that's actually good, which is the exploration.
Right. Those games were very linear.
And it's like, they're kind of are being strong-armed by Nintendo now, because Nintendo's taking away all the other than the Switch, obviously.
Right.
But they're like, look, this is going to be our flagship model. We're not going to have a Wii or like a 3DS and a DS anymore. So like, you got to figure it out. You got to figure out how to compete, because if you're just staying in the past and your best chance of like open world is just putting like some half-assed walk around park in your game where the camera changes suddenly, you gotta put more than a toe in the water.
Right.
You're like,
I agree.
This is a little bit of change. We'll see how it goes. Like, be bold.
Right.
Piss people off.
Well, and if you make people upset, I mean, that also just adds to like any reaction you invoke in somebody is going to be, I think, good. Like press, like any press is good press. Like when people are just sitting there mind numb to your going through the exact same experiences and type of game they've done for the last 20 years, like I think it's time that you do make a leap. You do something different. Yeah. And they've changed things a little bit, like reintroducing Pokemon in different worlds that have different typings and look different because of the worlds they live in. Like, that is a cool new mechanic that they added into the game. Granted, it doesn't change what Pokemon is, But it is, again, you said you're a little dabbling your little toe to see what works. And if it does, you keep it.
You know when users are making better games than you are on
we play a lot of really good fan Pokemon games.
When users can be more bold and daring than the company making the game originally, you got a problem. You have to learn to adapt. You have to get better. You can't. And I understand it's hard for Pokemon. They've been doing the same thing successfully. But if any, for like an eternity. But if anything can show them that they have a winning formula, almost regardless of story, as long as they leave the world open, it's Pokemon Go.
Right.
They never in a million years thought Pokemon Go was going to be super
And it was incredible.
I don't remember who made it.
Niantic.
Niantic. Whatever. I just remember it's a little hot air balloon. Niantic got the rights to that, and they were like, yeah, I guess, sure, do what you want. They weren't like, this is going to become a cultural phenomenon in which people are like driving in the streets and disturbing traffic flow because they want to get Pokemon. Right. But it did! Because guess what? Pokemon is exciting because it's about exploring the world, and you gave the people ability to do that. The reason that
the real world for that.
Yeah, the reason that Pokemon games on consoles haven't been good is because people don't care about graphical battles. They care about exploration.
Right.
So if you make the world bigger and more immersive, but actually utilize it with the characters you've created, of course it's going to work. It's going to be interesting. You can't be afraid to go down that road.
Yeah, and I think that hopefully this is going to be the next step. Like the next game, the problem is that they've been doing this thing where they do remakes of each generation, so Gen 4 is technically the next re-released game that they're going to do. But I really hope that, I mean, I feel like the wild areas in Sword and Shield are going to be highly receptive, but people are going to be like, I want more. Like, here's a small area that I can do this quote-unquote open world stuff with. I can find items, I can run into wild Pokemon, but like, I want more. And hopefully that pushes Pokemon Company enough to be like, okay, it works. We see it now. Now we don't have to take big risks. We can make our whole game open world.
We can just make the old game again.
And the last line to Mr. Underscore's article is he says, I don't need Pokemon to be exactly like Breath of the Wild, but I at least hope that it eventually becomes some type of open world experience.
I don't need it to be exactly like it, but like it'd be nice if it was exactly like it.
Because my favorite experiences with Pokemon is discovering things all on my own. But now in Sun and Moon, they're introducing a mini-map with quest markers, and that's just silly, because how can you discover anything if you're not allowed to get lost?
Wow.
Yeah.
Freaking poet.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah. I mean, that just goes back to the whole idea of being walked through a game. I mean, you're only going to this area because the game is pointing you in that direction, not because you're curious. You are curious, but the game's like, no, I have to tell you you're curious to go there.
It's the exact problem that Red Dead has.
Right.
Which is like, you have this massive world.
And people are interested in it.
And there's nothing to do other than these points of interest, which are so spread out.
Right.
And it's just like, it's so frustrating because you're like, it's so pretty, but like, that's it.
Right.
I want to be able to do more than in the real world. If you drop me in the desert in the real world, I would wander aimlessly and die.
I don't want to just wander aimlessly and die in my video games.
Right. That's not exciting.
Right.
And Pokemon has such an opportunity because of their huge fan base that they like.
And that's continually being added on by, and that's another thing. I mean, we talked about like generation gap in games. Pokemon has reached us when it first came out, and now kids that were our age when Pokemon first came out are starting Pokemon again. I mean, this game has gone through generations and generations of people. I mean, and that's
just imagine if the climbing mechanics from Breath of the Wild, where you like have like the stamina bar and you're climbing up the side of a mountain, was in Pokemon, where you literally could only get certain Pokemon above certain altitudes. Like, you had to climb up. There's, like, rock-dwelling Pokemon. Do you know how cool that would be? Do you know cool. And you'd have to, like, build up the stamina bar to be able to get to them. That would be, like, incredible. But no, they don't do that. What they give us is some weird, middle, non-fixed angle park, because they were like, oh, we gotta be careful. We don't want to piss anyone off. We want people to buy our game. But, like, do you want people to just to buy your game, or do you want people to really be like challenged and enjoy your game?
And see, this is the other thing. People like me, because there's a lot of me's out there. We're gonna buy your game regardless, which is the problem as well.
Yeah,
as also
you're the problem in the world, Jared.
But if it's like, if you're afraid to make a big risk and put your game out there because you're afraid people won't buy it, we're still gonna buy it.
Yeah.
That's I mean, again, the whole like, do what you want, we'll buy it anyways. I can see that being a problem because I'm gonna buy Sword and Shield regardless of what it is because I love the world. I love Pokemon. I may be disappointed at some things, but I do love the world, and that should be enough to let players explore this world. Just create the world and let them. Like Breath of the Wild was such. I mean, like you said before, it already had worked. They just put it in an open world environment, and it worked even better in that open world environment.
I think this will be the first game. This is a prediction. I don't think this game is going to do well, first of all.
Okay.
From what I've seen so far. I also think this is the first game that's going to start kind of flaking people off of the Pokemon franchise. But it is.
I don't want Pokemon to go away.
It's not. That's not what's going to happen. Hopefully, it will push them to be better. Knowing Pokemon, most likely it'll push them back into doing the same thing that they've always done, and we'll have 16-bit.
Right. They're gonna do something that's out of the world, out of their norm, and it's not gonna sell well. And they're gonna be like, oh, let's go back to what we did originally.
Yeah, but this is a different generation of people who are gonna carry this game. It can't be carried on people like you. You can't rely on just hardcore fans continually buying your games.
I want the games to be better. I do. But I love Pokemon.
That's the problem. You can love Pokemon, but you have to admit that they've been stuck doing the same thing.
I will. I can admit that verbally, but I'm still going to purchase the game.
That's the problem. If everyone purchases the games because they're the games, not because they're actually good. If Grand Theft Auto started making super derivative games and everyone just kept purchasing them because they were like, well, it's working.
Right.
Like if they just reskinned 4 and released it with like higher graphics, you'd be like, well, I'm gonna buy it because it's Grand Theft Auto, but like, I'm not happy about it. You shouldn't buy it if you're not happy about it.
I am happy about it, though.
I know, that's the problem.
I'm really excited.
And I will admit, they are trying something new, so I guess they deserve like some credit, very little credit.
And who knows? There may be more to this wild area than we might initially know about. Because, I mean...
No, it doesn't matter. It could be the most amazing wild area ever. That's so dumb. It would be like having an incredible game, and then all of us... It would like be having like an okay game, and then have an incredible like...
That's true.
...aspect of it. And then
the rest is just okay.
The rest of it's okay, and they just use that, and then you're like, well, I mean, we didn't do the whole game in this because we didn't know if it would work. So it's like,
I want it to be that they went with this direction because the world is always rendered. So like with Breath of the Wild, everything's rendered constantly. So if you go into a building, you're not like a black screen's not going up and then it's loading the inside of the building is loaded regardless if you go into it or not. And you can walk through the entirety of the world seamlessly. I really hope Pokemon's like that.
Yeah.
That because the world is rendering it all at once, that limit the idea of having an solely open world game, and going into the future with a Switch that may be more powerful, that will have a Pokemon that is fully open world and has the power to have everything rendered at the same time.
You could do it now. You have the power now.
There's Breath of the Wild that exists.
Also, the crazy thing about Pokemon is that you can't graphically get any better without it looking terrifying.
But yeah, this is Detective Pikachu.
This is peak graphic. This is it. This is where we're at. It has to be cartoony enough to not be realistic, because as soon as you start drawing realistic Pokemon, it loses all appeal.
It's going to look prettier, but still keep its stylized form. It's never going to dabble into realism, I don't think. I sure as hell hope not.
No, because this is the problem. We've gotten to the point where the characters in the game represent the anime, which is always the test that's judged against it. In the first games, it didn't represent it because they didn't have the graphical ability.
Correct.
You can't go above the anime.
Yeah.
You can't make it look more realistic than I mean, you're right, Detective Pikachu.
Right.
That's terrifying.
Well, see, now they're just like, well, the graphics can't get any better. I guess we'll do open world.
Sort of.
Will that work?
Half-assed open world.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm excited for Sword and Shield, but I'm also a hot, sweaty mess right now because we've been sitting in the closet for like an hour, so we're going to go.
Alrighty. Stay classy.
Bye, guys. Buy Pokemon Sword and Shield.
Don't buy it.
Buy it.
Don't buy it.